Hi guys, great to be here. I just wanted to say welcome to COP28 and the launch of TGP International's Sustainable Hospitality Initiative. So before we get going and I introduce everybody, I'm just going to hand you very quickly over to Nicola Beskin-Taylor, who is partner at TGP International, to give us a very brief overview about what it's all about.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us today for this launch. I think it's something that we've been developing for the last year or so, and I think, like many people, the consciousness of the urgency of climate change and the need for sustainable working practices has really come to our realization as a team and as a business, and the awareness of the UN SDG goals, and then looking at those and realizing how much hospitality touches nearly every single one of those goals through its supply chain, and therefore hospitality's potential and reach to drive huge change in this agenda. But the reality is that as operators, and hence why many of you are you're on the panel with us as people in the industry, that the industry is tough. The margins are tough, especially since COVID. Finding and keeping talent in the industry has been tough, and sustainability is still really quite low on the agenda, the day-to-day agenda for many people in the industry. So that's led us to two key questions. How do we change that for generations going forward? And how do we make that change inclusive? In our view, the sort of responses to these two questions and finding the answers to these questions is the key to driving the change or maximizing hospitality's potential to drive climate change. And that's the link for us and why we're launching this here at COP. And the purpose of us all talking today and talking to yourselves is to help us articulate that action plan and help us perhaps have some clear next steps of how we can take this initiative forward.
Thanks, Nicola. I mean, like you say, this is a thought-provoking discussion that we're going to have today, and it's really setting out an action plan for moving things forward. So, to quickly introduce, I know we've all said a quick hello before we started chatting here, but we do have Connor Spacey to my right, Chef Culinary Director for Food Space Ireland. Great to see you. To my left, we have Alexander Smalls, chef, author, restaurateur, and singer. I've heard today. Don't miss the small print here. Next to him, Anahita Dundee, celebrity chef and author. And down the end, last but by no means least, Paul Newnham, SDG2 Advocacy Hub. So let's get straight into business and get this conversation moving. I'd like to start with you, Alexander, if that's okay. And in your opinion, how successful is hospitality at being sustainable? So, what is holding it back, if anything?
When you say hospitality, are you speaking about the art of hospitality or the business itself?
The business as a whole. We're looking at the big picture here, and this is what we're trying to find solutions moving forwards.
Well, I think hospitality is very wasteful. I think there's a lot of waste, a lot of disposable product. I think that essentially, for most people, it's run by numbers. You meet your numbers, you meet your quotas, and out the back door goes a lot of wasteful products. Some of the ways that I've approached that and tried to be effective is creating a destination for a lot of the waste product, i.e. things that are still perfectly good that should be in service. I've adopted nonprofits, homeless agencies where we've been able to do those kind of things. But we have a lot of work to do, not just in, say, the physical plant of the restaurant, but also from the origin of where our food comes from, how we choose to eat, seasonal or otherwise, and those things that we have traditionally used, that the containers for our food, The way we present our food may need to be looked at as well. More biodegradable products, all kinds of things like that. So there's a lot of work to do, and I think that this is a real good beginning. This conversation.
Well, Paul, you've had 20, we'll not go into the full number, 20-something years of experience in sustainability, food systems, and as Alexander mentioned there, non-profit management. Give us your opinion on what you've seen and where we need to be moving forwards.
Yeah, look, I really think it does come down to how you define sustainability. And I think that often we oversimplify that. And I think that's also been probably consistent with our view of how food and food systems work. And I think we have to see food as part of a system. When you see food as part of a system, you start to think about all of the different elements that it connects to. And so we can't look at this one-dimensionally. We have to look at this from all different perspectives. So you have to start with the ingredients, and then you have to move right through to the end products that are put in front of people. You've got to look at the people, how the people are being employed, how they're being looked after, the work environment that they have. You've got to then look at a number of other ideas around accessibility, affordability issues. There's all kinds of elements that you can then look at. I know where, on the climate side, there's so many dimensions also, like looking at scope 1, 2, 3 emissions and different things like that in this space. So there's lots of areas you can kind of deep dive into. And I think sometimes that can paralyze people into doing nothing because they or just doing one thing. But I think for me, when you look at this, it's about a journey. It's about a process of actually being aware. And I think for me, when you look at, you understand kind of hospitality and catering businesses, it's about awareness and it's about education. And so educating yourself about where are the areas, looking all around, that you can actually improve, that you can actually look for ways to not only sustain, but also regenerate, to give back, to add value. And so for me, in order to do that, you really need frameworks.
Connor, you've been the recipient of many accolades for your sustainability work, and you're also one of the industry leaders when it comes to zero waste kitchens. Tell me about why that is one of the drivers moving forwards.
It's a bit, the way I look at it from my kind of view of the hospitality industry is that hospitality in itself is to be hospitable. So our job is to bring people into whatever it might be, restaurant, cafes, hotels, and provide a great service, great food, ambience, surroundings, and everything. And I like to flip that on its head and go, well, hang on, what if our hospitality business became an educational business towards our customers? And what I mean by that is that customers have a perception when they come into a place. They want certain things to look a certain way, and they want ingredients or food on the plate that they're used to. And as we move forward with generations, I personally think that people have become more and more distanced from the actual food system. So within food space, we kind of go, well, hang on, so what if we go back and change everything that's happening in the food system now and showcase what a sustainable food system is? And in a lot of cases, that actually means not giving the customers everything they want, but telling the story as to why. And so with that kind of mentality, what we've done is we've been, lots of different phrases. The one I like has been called the misfit of the hospitality industry. And I kind of thought, I'll take that, I like that. Where it's really turned it on its head. And what we've done is we've gone back into, like everything we've introduced is not something we've invented, it's things that happened in the past. We brought it into present day food to show how to fix a food system and use modern technology and AI systems as well to give us data to be able to stand by the numbers. So with that, what we've done is we've gone super local. So all our kitchens dotted around Ireland and UK only work within 50-mile radius. So every kitchen is very, very different. It's not like a brand that is the same everywhere you go. But also remembering that food is global and always will be global. For my case in Ireland, we don't grow exotic fruits, tea, coffee, spices, chocolate. We import that. So it's telling the story of importing that and that in some ways uncomfortable for our customers, but I kind of like that. We get into the whole sustainability piece and the dark area of the food system around child labor, around human trafficking, around deforestation. And sometimes it's stories that customers don't want to hear, but we tell it in a way that as they're eating the food, they're being educated, if that makes sense. So it's really, we started with that model. We're almost 10 years going now, and it's over 25 restaurants, and it's really got to the stage where people look to us now, and it's kind of put a pressure on us that people look to us, what's the next thing I can do? So we use, we align with the SDGs and put that into the food system, and then we gently nudge, but in a way that makes people really think about, you know, what they need to do as consumers coming into the hospitality. And like that, and in the back office, not only is it where we buy our food, it's all around our staff and what we do. We're very lucky. Most of our restaurants are private within organizations. So it's like Monday to Friday, daytime hours only, weekends off. You know, we go above and beyond 6 weeks holidays a year. We pay way over what the standard is and all that. And that's trying to bring people and build a whole model around food, people and planet, and use our food to educate consumers, to really highlight what the problems are, and not in a bad way, but let consumers know the food that they are expecting or demanding is half the reason we're in the situation we're in.
Well, that, I mean, you've mentioned a couple of key phrases there, and I mean, ownership, leadership, and education is very much key. And this is something I wondered, you know, how savvy are the customers? You talk about not giving them everything that they want, and I think this is something else that Anahita can probably play into in terms of driving, you know, SDGs and where you see that all fitting in.
So honestly, I think the role of the chef has always been really confined to your kitchens. We've, you know, for years we've just been in our kitchens, and it's been hard to get out of regular operations to actually start thinking about, you know, where is our food coming from, where is it being grown, what are we putting on the plate. And I think majorly, if I talk about the hospitality industry in India, it's so large. We have a phrase in Hindi which means it's Atithi Devo Bhava, which means your guest is God, because ultimately, you know, you want your guests to come back, you want them to keep coming back to your restaurants or your hotels or wherever you know it might be. And India, in terms of hospitality, is a very, very big market, and I do see it expanding, and it's a big place where, you know, a lot of opportunities for employment's also there. And now, even though India has its traditional ways of dealing with hospitality, yes, as Chef was talking about, you know, the numbers and the waste is kind of increasing, and that's happening because there's so many options, and we're kind of losing track from our old traditional roots. And that happened about 5 years ago, or maybe more, I think 8 years ago, when I actually stepped out of the kitchen and I was like, what am I doing every single day? I'm just producing food. But where is the thought with waste, with ingredients, with nutrition, with connecting to the farmer? And I think I just had to step out of the kitchen to really study, take our time, and we all get so caught up with our businesses that we forget, you know, what we're actually putting on a plate. That's when I started working with millets, and I, you know, realized that millets is an ancient grain from India that we've stopped using. And it's the International Year of the Millet. So very happy to be showcasing that all over the world. And I just want to say that I think each of us has that awareness, and I think we are drivers of change, like Connor was talking about it. I have done that with local regional food, Indian food, and with millets. And I know that the industry, the hospitality industry, at least in India, is really looking inwards now at Ayurveda, at yoga, at Indian ingredients, and working together as a community to bring that change and be more sustainable, like they were probably, you know, so many hundreds of years ago.
Well, that's it. And what we're talking about is the influence of food, you know, and engaging with every aspect of society and the communities, like you say. Nicola, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here. You know, why do you think there is such a high failure rate in hospitality? You know, what is needed to help change that?
I mean, it's such a fractured industry. You know, there is, if you look at many other industries, you've got these sort of quite established ways of developing these business models. And I think there's, the beautiful thing about hospitality is that it's actually a very creative industry. And I think what Connor and Aita, you're talking about are really creative, innovative ways to sustainability, which your customers are responding to. And you both talked about customers a lot. I think something that is linked here is how do we help your teams and bring other people into the industry with the learnings that you've made about how this is build an amazing business, a beautiful hospitality business. It's creative and does everything, but it's also sustainable as well. And you're doing groundbreaking things and being incredibly innovative and did you call yourself a misfit? Being a misfit, But should that be the case? How do we make it? How do we help create something that's more established, that is, an educational process for people to come into the industry that secures a little bit more business foundation, so that then they've got the resource and the capability to look at more sustainable working practices?
I'm going to put that question to Paul. Paul, how do we help people create those new industry innovations?
Look, I think what I see, and we work globally, and so you see lots of different ways. And I think the challenge is when you're looking for one solution or one trick, you tend to get fairly disappointed. I think what we have to do is and I think Aita, you talked about this, going back to go forward. And I think sometimes we need to look back to look and see what are the solutions that have been there in our food system, in our culture, in our communities that can take us forward. And it's not everything in the past is not always better, but there are things that, Indigenous communities, different cultures have developed, which can be used and brought forward, that have been forgotten often. Generally, they've been forgotten for reasons of trying to simplify, to drive profit, these kinds of things, but they actually can be currency in the catering. They can help build a brand, they can build a story, and that story people are looking for. And so I think as we want to change, we need to be thinking about how we're adding those stories to food, because food is more than just this transactional thing that happens where you just want to eat to get what you need and then leave. It's an experience. And I think when you're curating those experiences, you need to build in the storytelling about sustainability, about those kinds of practices that are good for people and planet into the way that you're actually doing business.
Well, Chef Smalls, that's been very fundamental to your career, hasn't it? Being able to tell these stories through your work. Can you just elaborate on that for us, please?
Well, what I'd like to do, that as well as resonate a bit on what Paul was saying, because it's sort of like a light switch, really. I have not been working for years in sustainability. I've wrapped myself around this new term to kind of look at what I've done in the last 35 years in hospitality. But clearly, I think we need to define in motion sustainability. We almost need a handbook. We need a vocabulary. We need a way to really make it practical, applicable. It needs to work for us. When we say the word sustainability, we should all know what we're talking about clearly with a plan of action. And that is what I would like to see, not only for everyone else, but myself included, because it is a term that's coming out of the closet in a sense. All of a sudden we are talking about this, and we are joining forces with the international and the global community to talk about how we save the planet, how we save ourselves. What does that roadmap look like? Do we go back and get other things that we once did? Do we find new innovations? And what's the cause? What are the principles? What's the way to get there?
So what does sustainability mean to you? I'm going to ask everybody actually around this table. Tell me what it means to you.
She's asking me.
But You know, I put you on the spot. You brought it up.
And as I said, as the newcomer to the concept, what I've taken from the conversation, the first thing that comes to mind is a consciousness.
Yeah.
And then it's a knowledge of how you take the idea of sustainability beyond being a word. It means that I'm going to be thoughtful, considerate about my actions in a very self-indulgent discipline. Because hospitality, I think you said it, Connor, is we're supposed to give people what they want, the best experience. In fact, our customers come sometimes defining what our hospitality should be for them. And it's very indulgent. If they're coming out and they're going to spend all this money on a plate of food, and that is expensive, they really want you to give them, everything, including a light dance. And so it's sort of like, okay, if that steak has been marked up so high and the margins will allow you to have, say, a 20% waste on that, what do you do with that? You throw it in the garbage for the bin to go? Do you find other? So it's coming back to what you said. We've got to define this thing universally.
Paul, define it.
Yeah. So I mean, as you were talking, Chef, this is really hard to define, because when you look at a big world, everyone's coming at from slightly different starting points. So when we were trying to look at this and we were working on the Sustainable Development Goals and looking at how do we went, let's go back to what the Sustainable Development Goals were. So for those that aren't aware of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals were created in 2015 as basically a plan for the world, agreed by all world leaders, on how to deal with the big issues we face. And they have an action plan behind them. So there's 17 goals, and then there's a series of measures under each goal. So it ends up being a few hundred different measures that countries are reporting back to at the United Nations together around, okay, over 15 years. Signed on in 2015, right through to 2030. So within that we took that as the foundational frame, because we were like, all the world leaders signed on, they negotiated, they got it there. It's good enough for me. Let's not argue with it. I've tried arguing with it a couple of times. I got slapped pretty hard. They said, don't argue with a negotiated agreement. So we took that, but then we said, this is global and it's for everyone. What does that look like in a kitchen? What does that look like for a chef? So we work with chefs in 35 countries to develop a framework called the Chef's Manifesto, which has an action plan that takes the language from the goals and ties that into a series of things that people can do in their kitchen. And all it was a tool. It was just a tool to take some of those ideas and turn them into that. And then to say, everyone's going to do it slightly different, because everyone's got a slightly different vibe. We're here in Dubai, it's desert. There's a very different, local and seasonal means something very different to Ireland or India or New York, very different. So we have to be careful that we don't become unsustainable by forcing something on someone else. But what we have to all do is have individuals who are super intelligent, smart people in their own context, really being aware and working on that. And so that's kind of the way that frame, and that's the way we've approached it, is found that foundation. And then we've kind of said, let's reinterpret that. Let's create a way, a framework for chefs to be able to engage.
Anahita, picking up there what Paul was saying, what does it look like for the chef in the kitchen from your perspective and geographically, from the Indian background that you're coming from?
As chefs, like I said before, that we just get so busy in our world, in our kitchens with our food and, prepping orders every day. Sometimes sustainability goes out of the window because you have to prep for X number of people. It's busy, it's hectic. You want to, but you can't. And I see that happening in the industry all over the world. But there are little things that I have started doing, and I have been, kind of amplifying those things. And I know those are steps towards creating a sustainable kitchen. I'm not going to say it's 100%, but I know there are steps, and I know that all of us can take those steps. And there are things that I've picked up from the Chef's Manifesto, which I could have probably learned from Corner or some other part of the world, and I've shared wisdom about Indian ingredients or spices or nutrition, and we kind of exchange those ideas. And for us, those are little thinking points which get us to create new dishes. Now, for example, if I've got a cauliflower in my kitchen, and this actually happened in my kitchen, my team was prepping like 5 kilos of cauliflower, just chopping off the florets, getting that ready. We were making a biryani, and all the the drumsticks. I'm saying, in Hindi we say dantal, or the roots and the stalks. So they were just literally like chucking that into the bin. And when I saw that in the bin, I said, this is not supposed to be in the bin, because the leaves and the stalks, they're both edible, and even if not, they can go into a stock, or you can make like a salt out of it. You can put it into a curry. It's delicious. And I don't think they realized it, because they were so busy in prepping that it was completely ignored. And I know this is a problem. We've seen it happen. It's just about stepping in that moment, putting it in their minds, telling them that you can actually take that step, create a new dish out of it, which you could give complimentary to your guests, because it's literally being made out of waste. And as people in the industry, and as business people, when you share those ideas with your partners, with your business partners, they suddenly get very excited, because they're like, your food waste will go down and you're going to create something new. So I know that all of us have ideas. It's all about implementing them. It's about taking out that time in that day where you're crazy busy. But I know it can happen, and we've been doing it successfully for so many years. I've done it with ingredients, with millets, and with bringing more women in the kitchen, which I also feel is a big part of the hospitality industry, which I haven't seen in India. I was literally the only girl in my kitchen with almost 30 men, and now I have like 50% women in my kitchen in the last 10 years. So I've seen that grow, and I know that change will happen slowly.
But I think she just stumbled onto something brilliant, which is gourmet waste. I mean, I love the concept. Maybe now we need to add another
Page on the
category
menu.
on the menu that talks about our gourmet waste. And 50% off.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also a lot of that comes out of the classical school of French cooking.
Yeah.
Getting rid of the imperfections.
Yeah.
Take this
And I think we're
shape
all
of a
now,
tomato.
now today we're actually like embracing the ugly fruits and vegetables.
Oh, the ugly.
We don't want them to go to waste. We call
Ugly
them ugly.
fruits and vegetables. Oh my goodness.
No, but I love this, because what I've started to do, for example, take the collard greens. Everybody wants the tender pod.
Yeah.
It grows so big, and you have, you take the leaves off the stem. You have the soft stem that you might leave, but then that big stem pod. So I've taken to essentially chopping them up, soaking them in garlic, olive oil, walking them or hitting them to the stem, and they become garnish for a nice plate of collard greens. And those stud pieces have all of the intense flavor in them.
And so much fiber. So
Yes.
there's actually so much nutrition as well.
But Chef Smalls, you've touched on something as well within that. You mentioned the gourmet and the French cooking, but the hospitality ownership and management sectors are filled by the privileged. How do we make it a lot more inclusive for people from all socio-economic backgrounds?
Well, I think we have to create an entry for people who are not able to find themselves, in the center of a James Beard kitchen or Michelin kitchen, or even can make it from their local communities to come downtown and even ask for a job. We have to create pathways for people to get to the places we want them to be. And that really involves reaching out, having educational programs. When I opened my last 2 restaurants in Harlem, New York, for example, it was imperative that we hire predominantly from the community. We had to go out and find them. We engaged workforce organizations, nonprofits, and we set up seminars all over the community of Harlem, bringing people in. We made lunch for them. We talked about the industry, and then we started a training program alongside the day-to-day work. But then we teamed up with CCAP, which is an incredible organization in New York, training young chefs, and we then brought them in and taught them and helped them graduate through the process. But we have to reach beyond the obvious. And, I imagine it's this way in most places, but particularly in New York, all of your servers are Broadway stars. They're just waiting on the phone to ring. In the meantime, they will help you out. They're happy to help you out. And so, and sometimes you have those people who are already 50 years old, but they're ready to go. My point is that the barrier then becomes other people, say from the community, who would be a workforce, who would see that as a profession and not a stopgap in their careers. And those are the people we have to find, train, and bring them forward into our disciplines.
So that clearly is a challenge, and something that needs addressing and putting, the industry out there and, making it more visible, I guess. But for you, Connor, surely that is just a basic.
It is, and I think a lot of it is depending on how you enter the business yourself.
Yeah.
And that gives you more. So I was a school dropout, hated school, left home at 16.
Yeah.
Left Ireland, went to the UK because there was no work in Ireland, had no education, had no skills, had nothing, couldn't get a job. I used to play the bass guitar, sold my bass to get the ticket to get to the UK.
We've got a band here between you and Chef Smalls.
I have a gig later on. So I had enough money for 2 weeks, basically, and I couldn't get a job. No one wanted it. At the time, being Irish in the UK wasn't good either.
Yeah.
So both being Irish and no education, nothing, I couldn't get work. So I got into a hotel and wash pots. And I didn't know, I wasn't interested in the catering industry at that stage. I'm 35 years as a chef now, but back then, I had no interest in it. But when I got in it and I saw the adrenaline and the rush and the service, I thought, this is really cool. What is this like? I was like, this is cool. And from going to the head chef for months saying, can we look at this? Can we look at that? And he was like, go wash the walls or wash pots. Like, get out. You know what I mean? I was like, who is this kid? So I did a deal with him. And I used to know it was Christmas time, it was a really busy hotel at the time in London. And all these turkeys, so they were, they were roasting these turkeys every day for all these big parties. Anyway, there's a lot of leftovers. So, and I was really conscious of this because that's how I was brought up. We just didn't waste food. So I used to segregate all the food the chefs were throwing out. And I went back into the head chef and I showed him all this food. And I said, if you teach me what I can do with all this, I will make staff food every day with food that you're throwing out. This was 35 years ago.
You had a strong Irish mammy, didn't you?
And he was like, let's do it. So fast forward to today, my biggest respect out of all our teams, we have quite a large team today, there's over 300 people within food space, and out of the entire team, I respect them all, but my biggest respect is for the guys and girls coming in and washing pots. Yeah. And we were always like, what are we going to do with this? So we send them through college. We already have the last 6 people just qualified as chefs a month ago that started with us 2 years ago and washing pots. So what we do is we send them to catering school. So they do like part-time, they do 3 days with us learning and 2 days in college and come through and work their way up. So what we want to do for food space is use this as a platform for dropouts, misfits like me, that enjoy it and go, well, hang on. So if you're enjoying this, let's do it. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't always work. We've had people that have gone to college come back to us and go, this is great, but I want to be a beautician. And they're gone. And we kind of go, shit, I just wasted 2 years of investment in this person. That's going to happen.
You can't even get them to give your hairdo.
No, exactly. I'm like, it's total waste of money.
I know. That's what I love about what you said. You know who else started like you did? Pierre Cham.
Oh, okay.
Started washing pots, at one of my favorite restaurants in New York. And look at him now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. I think it depends on the view you have of how you started.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that in terms of demographically, but geography, I'm guessing, plays a major role in this. Depending on where you're coming from in the world, Paul, some people just will not have the access to get into the kitchens or to go knock on those doors.
Yeah, I mean, access and is a major challenge, and I do think overall the hospitality industry is a space which attracts people that are low skilled, often new immigrants in communities or transitioning from somewhere to somewhere else, and I think this has been massively a challenge because we've just seen with COVID, a lot of the big disruptions that have happened in the last little while have had huge impacts on this community. And now I think there's a kind of recognition of how challenging that is. I mean, I know when COVID was was living in the UK, and there's just the hospitality industry, all chefs everywhere were saying, we just don't have staff. But then also, if you look at the industry, what happened during COVID is so many people lost their jobs. Now, I'm from Australia, we had a safety net, government stepped in, helped to support them. I know in India, I was talking to chefs, it was the chefs stepped in, opened up the pantry, their own pocket to keep their staff on or to keep their staff fed. Yeah. And so I think there is massive disparity in this space. And I think this goes to that conversation around why business fails as well. Yeah. And so what tends to happen is you tend to concentrate the catering into a few larger companies in a space, because the smaller ones, it becomes harder in those ups and downs. And we all know we're going through a more volatile period globally with climate impacts, conflict impacts, COVID and other issues, really challenging. And so what I'm seeing is the industry can either respond to that in innovative ways with programs that actually really look after and develop loyalty in their teams, that help develop new talent, that attract people in, or it can respond in a way that actually almost forces people out of the sector to other more secure, less demanding jobs, driving an Amazon van, things like this that are also, and then all of a sudden you're in trouble. And
we saw this during COVID as well,
yeah.
Remember? I mean, essentially with the government subsidies that happened, a lot of people didn't come back. Yeah. When it was time to come back, a lot of people were able to essentially look at different opportunities, because in most cases, those restaurant jobs were, let's say, less than what the normal salary is to be able to support yourself, particularly in a city like New York. So, to your point, we're talking about attracting people to the profession, but we also have to look at how do we keep workers in the profession, how we pay them a decent wage so they can take care of themselves and participate in this.
Well, Nick, on that note,
I was going to ask, Naita's, I think in her restaurants did some amazing stuff, also expanding who works in this space.
So I was just going to talk about inclusivity. I think, as business owners and chefs, it's about having a team where you have that broad-minded attitude to create some amount of change. It might be discomforting to you as a business, but what we did at our restaurants is that we had a lot of our servers who were deaf and hard of hearing. So we actually created a program where they would come on your table, you had the menu, you would tick on it, you would give it to them. And I remember in the beginning when we did get people and hire people, the kitchen team, the service team, everyone was so agitated. They didn't know how to respond. They didn't know how to communicate. We actually created training programs. And I know it's a little bit more work. It's going to take time. It's going to be slow. But eventually, I remember we compared notes, and we had those people with us for a longer period of time, and they grew and they learned, and it became such a great environment where customers were happy to learn a little bit of sign language, a little bit of probably drawing or ticking and communicating with them. It was all done in a very nice and respectful manner. So I feel there is space for everyone. It is an inclusive industry if you want to make time for it, but it is hard for business owners. It can take time. But we've done really well with a lot of women as well in our teams, and I know it's going to get better.
Well, Nicola, that leads us into, and someone mentioned it earlier, we talk about retention. How important is that investment in people to support a sustainable future for the industry?
Well, yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of those topics here about, people, stepping stone industry. It's quite a transient workforce. And I think also, TGP International is a hospitality agency, consultancy, and so many people go, what's that? What do you do? Wow, the fact that, but you wouldn't necessarily say that about retail, or you wouldn't say that about entertainment. People understand other industries, that they've got this broad reach, and that you can come from lots of different disciplines and lots of different backgrounds, and that you can have a career that moves within a sector, but crosses lots of different jobs, shall we say. And people just don't seem to associate that with hospitality at the moment. It doesn't seem to be. It's like, oh, well, you work in the kitchen, you work on the floor, but that's the opportunity. And actually, I think I think as hospitality becomes more and more prominent, and it's the thing that builds communities. It's the thing that people go to a new development to see and join and try. If a restaurant makes or breaks a new development, or actually is a reason to go and visit a place that's out of town. And that's increasing more and more. And I think as that happens, people will start to understand how diverse and rich the opportunities are in the industry. And I think that's also part of sustainable hospitality, is that this isn't just for kitchens or front of house. This is for the whole ecosystem that there is to support the industry.
Well, when we look at responsibility, Connor, how does hospitality become a leading example of driving change, from the industry, I guess, and not just, and this is something that Alexander mentioned before, not just from the government perspective?
In terms of sustainability, and showing change, to me, it's about the food on the plate, and that tells the story. And it's showing consumers, it's helping farmers, it's understanding geographically where you are, what that food on the plate should look like. And that is, to me, the biggest driving change that a chef can do to support the local farming community and what's going on there, and to showcase that to consumers. And I think that we should never forget, within the hospitality industry, probably how we can really influence people that eat with us. And that is that lots of people will find a new ingredient or something they really like in a restaurant or a hotel and try to replicate that at home to some degree. And it's using that, we're like these middle people in the food system, where we're in between the farmer and the consumer, and using that responsibility to really showcase how it can be done right. But as Paul mentioned, right is very different depending on where you are. Like, right to me in Dublin could be different to right to you in New York. You know what I mean? So it's really understanding what is right to the industry you're in and where it is geographically and how that looks, and showcase that on a plate. To me, that's the simplest way to show sustainability, and tell the story. Make sure people understand why and what it is that they're eating, and how that's better.
I wanted to know, really, how we're this is all, as we say, moving forward. It's about educating. It's about the next generation of people who are coming up through the industry. How should we be encouraging them to make this a sustainable career choice? What are your thoughts, Paul?
Look, I think encouraging people to make this a sustainable choice is really giving them the inspiration. I think they've got to be inspired, so they've got to see it. And I think this is something that I think, as you said, Alexander, sometimes our top restaurants haven't necessarily demonstrated that. Some have, but some haven't. Some have been wasteful. They've been encouraging probably eating things that maybe we should eat less of, not more of, or those kinds of. And these are limits. But to me, I think there is that conversation. But I think increasingly people are inspired by they can see the world's changing. They can see that's impacting people's health. They can see that's impacting our environment. They can see that's impacting people's jobs and their accessibility and their inclusivity. And so if you look at these different dimensions, I think restaurants are a microcosm of this. They're a place we gather to celebrate. They're a place we gather to meet with people, to engage. And so what we meet and engage around, we all personally have like things we like. You know, I would say food is where like the climate agenda becomes personal. And it's also the human health agenda. So if you think about that, you go, it's an amazing platform. You know, most of TV and everything and entertainment is about food and chefs and their storytelling. It's like the heart of our culture. As that connects with this environment, this challenge we face, there's an opportunity for that to really tip into sustainability, to tip into ethics, to think about how do you bring that out in the right way. And I think the next generation, and Pierre would say this, is interrogating people now about their standard. They're exposing where it doesn't happen, and they're really calling it out. And some cultures that hasn't quite got there, but it's coming. And so for me, that's not something to be scared about. It's something to embrace. And then it's really about how do we demonstrate that and uplift that. And so it's thinking about how do you actually make that really engaging and talk about how that can be actually profitable as well. Like when I remember talking to a lot of chefs about waste, and they just go, it's about profit. You know, you bought the ingredient. If you then throw half of it out, like you're throwing out the profit.
But isn't this about a shift in just resetting the thought process and the system, ultimately?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a change of habit as well.
Yes, exactly.
And for chefs, as we just touched on, like a lot of food waste within the chef kitchens comes from the old French style cuisine where everything had to look a certain way and aesthetically be pleasing. And that led to chefs understanding that it's okay to throw away half a cauliflower because I've kept the best bit. And so when chefs come into the industry, when they do leave colleges, and this is a universal colleges, they are still trained in certain ways of cooking that they're not exposed to seeing, they're not trained anyway of understanding the waste end of it. And they come into kitchens, they're like, what do you mean you don't throw anything out? What do I do with that? Because it's a whole new world to them. So you really have to, you're breaking habits.
Yeah, it's like training and then untraining.
Untraining, exactly. And that's what we do. So when they come into us, we go, you know, so if they've been to college, we go, everything you learned in college, you go, yeah, forget it.
Get it.
But
Leave it out there. We're going to start all again.
the fastest growing course at Cordon Bleu is the plant-based course.
Yeah.
They did it out of London, and everyone was like, are you kidding? And it was oversubscribed, and it's been growing super fast. Now that's just an example. That's just one dimension.
That's
Plant-based
also a
is
sign.
one way.
Yeah.
But it's just showing in that space, you know, that bastion of French cuisine, it's moving fast.
There has to be change.
There's going to be change.
Everyone understands that. But interestingly enough, I was thinking about this. We as chefs, restaurateurs, we are the storytellers. We are the poets that put the food on the plate. We are the messengers. We have a responsibility to change the relationships and rules of engagement, you know, and we've done that over the years. I mean, I've been in this industry over 30 years, and I can remember creating all kinds of different menus. I can remember when we brought in the menus of vegetarian, then plant-based, then non-dairy, then all of these things that we wanted to communicate. So we have the platform, we have the tools, we have to have the consciousness, the sense of responsibility to engage, you know, our clients into a new landscape. And we can do it gradual. I mean, people love options. So you do it in a way that you offer options. The gourmet waste menu. We don't say that, but we give you an opportunity.
What is the challenge for that though? Because I'm playing devil's advocate here. Don't shoot the messenger. But you know, people don't like change. How do you get into the psyche of people to say this has to be done?
But they don't like change. But first and foremost, the people that are leading the charge of change have to do so, understanding, you said this earlier, who their customer base is, the location and stuff, and introduce them to something that is so irresistible, you'll want to follow me here, you know?
So just adding on to what he said and what you asked, I think it's all about leading by example. I mean, I see that in my own kitchens. People will only follow you when they actually see what's happening and it actually tastes good. So there are times that, we did this brownie, a simple chocolate brownie with millet flour. There was no refined flour. And a lot of people were very skeptical. They didn't even want to try it. They never ordered it on the menu. So we just put it outside, we just cut small pieces and we just kept it outside. And as soon as it was outside, everyone was picking it up and everyone was eating it. And they were like, this is so good, this is so nice. And we were like, yes, this is what we want you to eat. That's why we're, so I think it's all about engaging with your customer base, finding
100%.
ways to connect with them. And once you do that, they respond really well and they will embrace it.
But maintaining, I guess, that level of leadership at the same time.
And quality and flavor. I think that's where chefs come into play because
Yeah,
we know how to
it's got to
treat.
taste good, yeah. Or
It
they
just
won't.
has to be delicious.
But my biggest learning when we started the business we're doing now was I don't have a lot of patience, so when I wanted to stop something, I would just stop it. You know what I mean? You take something off the menu, and that was it. And someone come in and say,
It's not here anymore.
"Well, I used to love that dish." And go, "You're not getting it anymore." And I was like, "I'm handling this really badly." So communication, education, I learned later is really important.
Like, did you put it up on your board?
Yes,
saying,
we do
last
a
day of this.
Yeah, so we do
this day.
countdowns. I was told, Connor, let's do it correctly next time. So what we do now is we do a countdown. So we would say, okay, and each year we pick 4 key items, like what that might be. So many years ago, it was like when everyone was having avocados and toast, we never had them. We never had farm fresh salmon. So and I used to just come and say, well, that used to be here, it's not here anymore. And then we go, this guy's nuts. So then I understood that was actually to tell the story about why it isn't there. So we would explain on the menus coming off, and then through our marketing and so on, we'd have 4 avocados is 240 liters of water, this many earthquakes and deforestation in South America, this much child labor. You know what I mean? And people go, shit, I don't want avocado on toast anymore. We go, exactly. So now let's introduce you to new avocado on toast, which
And
is
I need a
broccoli stalks.
therapist.
And we go, here's your guacamole. And we come up with guacamole using broccoli stalks instead of avocados. We go, this is delicious. We go, exactly. Thank you. And so that's what I learned. I couldn't just do it and not explain why I did it.
Yeah.
And so then when we started to
So that is-
explain, we got the buy-in.
Absolutely perfect. Leading by example. So,
And you have to remember, as a restaurateur, as a chef, people are coming to you for an experience. When they come into your place, unless you are, a bucket of chicken place, or hot dogs on the stand, but if you have a restaurant that's serving a kind of cuisine, they are coming to you for an experience. So you already have the upper hand and the advantage. The only thing, to your point, that you have to cushion is the fact that if they come to you for a barbecue duck every Thursday night and it's not there,
there's trouble.
then you have to handle that. Otherwise, you are in control of their experience. So give it to them. Give them something, but just make sure that the experience keeps them wanting.
Yes,
Yeah.
it has to still be enjoyable.
Yes.
And as Anita said, it has to be tasty. It's got to look good because
Yeah.
that's the industry we're in.
As you were.
I was just going to say, the majority of people make choices around food based on cost, convenience, and taste. And so it's usually, you've got to have at least 2 of these for anyone to be anywhere near happy. But it costs, convenience, taste. And so they don't make it on sustainability generally. That's a secondary thought. The convenience is, I'm in the restaurant now, so, what are you going to feed me? But I think in catering, this is really critical. And I think so often what it is in sustainability is they put less effort. And so you actually end up with really bad tasting food, or you have really messy food that's not convenient, or you charge more for it. And I think that's part of the challenge as well. And then go, oh, that didn't work. And I think it's actually, chefs have got to use their magic powers around taste and storytelling to actually really deliver on that taste inside budget and be making it more convenient. And I think this is the big thing. I think there's some interesting things when you start to look at pricing around labor. Ingredients often can be cheaper, but labor can go up to get that balance right. And that depends on the location you're in, but that also requires some creativity in the kitchen around how you do that.
And it's a very fair point, because profit sometimes to the outside world is like a dirty word.
Yeah.
You have to be profitable to be
It's a
sustainable.
business.
It's
Yes.
So the first thing
sustainability.
is you have to make your margins be profitable, or else you're not
Gotta be it.
sustainable anyway.
You won't be
so
in business.
let's, so you're
And,
100% right.
I mean, if
It's
you
that-
want to take care of your staff and you want to do things for
Yeah.
your staff, you have to have that budget to, take care of
Absolutely.
their
Or
health
else-
insurance or their,
Yeah, you
you
can't
know,
move forward.
like how
Yeah.
you spoke about the college. You can only do that if you have that
If,
money.
yeah.
you
And
make
it
your
kind
money.
of does start there.
Yeah, you got to
honest.
make money. I
You
mean,
gotta make
that's the
money.
thing.
And
And
I think when you mention, not you, but I mean, when people mention the word profit, they go, "Oh, you're making." Sorry, is that illegal? I need to make it to survive.
no, but see, that's why with
You know, it's
the
kind
with
of-
the SDGs, we talk about people, planet, and prosperity.
Yeah.
And the prosperity is about enabling people to be able to survive and prosper. And that means that starts from very different places, but it's not about, it's about prosperity being built into it and saying, you know what, the farmers should get paid, the staff should get paid, the owners, everyone needs to be paid in this.
Yeah.
Fair wages.
In a way that's got some equity, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you should also, the customers should pay, for whatever is appropriate.
And that's an interesting point, because we haven't really talked a lot about the fact that, most customers see restaurants as two-dimensional, just like grocery stores. They have not a clue how that food got to the grocery store. My father's in the grocery business. And later in New York years, I used to do a fresh air fund where I would take young kids to my country place and show them the gardens, and on the train when we were taking them, there would be animals and things and all that stuff. And they were from New York City, public housing. They'd never seen any of that. They thought somehow the grocery store made the food. My point is this: when you walk in the restaurant, the whole experience is really about whatever's in your kitchen, whatever the waiter brings out, but they are not engaged or knowledgeable about the road to your kitchen and how that becomes part of your expense, and how that is so much a part of your prices. COVID taught people a whole lot of new things that they didn't understand, because there was a COVID tax in some places. There was administrative fees put on restaurant bills and all kinds of built-in things. You thought it was a cable bill, because all of these new things were there. But that has to also be part of the education. I mean, we cannot assume that people just show up and think, oh, yeah, well, the food, it just grew here or something.
True.
Paul, you mentioned magic powers earlier. If you had some of those magic chef powers and could implement one sustainable change overnight for the industry, what would that be?
One change. I never like making choices like this. Look, I think it would be to really help the industry understand the impact they can have.
Mm-hmm.
I just really don't feel that the industry really believes that. I think individual chefs do, but I don't think the industry as a sector is coming together in the way that it could. I think it's too busy competing and a race to the bottom sometimes.
That's interesting. We haven't really discussed that in terms of collaboration and how important that is for a sustainable change.
And it's a really fair point, because the industry we're in is such a competitive industry, because you're in an area where this is the size of the apple pie, and now all of a sudden there was 4 restaurants and we all got a quarter each. Now there's 24 restaurants and your slices are getting smaller and smaller, and it gets so competitive that it's very difficult to collaborate with people, because people are like, no, well, hang on, we're all fighting for the same footprint of the same population of people, and it's very, very difficult to move forward, as you just said, and that is a problem. A real problem, because we are a competitive industry, and that's it. We want to attract bums on seats, so we want to do better than guy down the block is doing. You know, so it's like, well, I'm not going to talk to that person or help that person because I want, and this is where the whole disconnect is, and no, we're not coming together as a community to really make change.
Well, I think, Nicola, this is one of the drivers behind when we talk about the TGP International Sustainable Hospitality Initiative.
It's a mouthful,
It
isn't
was a bit of a mouthful there, but I got it out this
We were
time.
trying to
Don't
make it
worry.
more
You know, we talk about like ownership, leadership, education, but collaboration, I guess, is very much a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it before about it being a fragmented industry, and you know that it's much broader than what you see when you just walk in a restaurant, and I think that ties into collaboration as well. I think just sort of touching back on a couple of things that from the discussions about principle, I think sort of idea about sustainable hospitality for us is that profit isn't a dirty word, and that actually sustaining business in the industry is absolutely fundamental to helping the industry realise its potential, which you know you just touched on there. But I'm actually keen to, if I can, ask a question about you both talked about learning and then unlearning. And I suppose, how easy would it be to change that learning so that you didn't have to unlearn, and that actually then as part of coming into the industry, you know, all the things that you've been talking about were part of that education, and that you came into the industry and the on-the-job training was already engaged in the practices and the philosophies and all the ideas that we think we need to drive the change. How easy or how do we make that start? What's the first step?
My experience is that it's difficult. So I've engaged with colleges and universities and worked and done, you know, classes and all with them, with students. But it's like trying to turn the Titanic in a river. So you've got this big monster of education, and depending on where it is, whether it's government education, private education, that work to a certain curriculum, and you're coming in and you're kind of going, we need to change it because it's not suiting modern food and modern, you know, where it needs to be. It's a big ask. You have some very forward-thinking training schools and colleges that do it, and you have others that find it very difficult. And it's a bit like what we just said. It's that collaboration trying to move forward. If everyone's not on the train, you know, people get left behind. And I have found it mixed. So, you know, we have a lot of people in our industry that in our business that have come into our business untrained and have come in trained. And funnily enough, you know, okay, after a year or 2 years, they're thinking the same, but you've had to brainwash one and you've had to bring the other one on a journey. So it's as equally, no matter what, the training has to go in anyway. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? So when, from day one, you have to start training.
Yeah, I just want to add to what he said, because, you know, in every kitchen, there's a different kind of a leadership.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way his kitchen would be and my kitchen would be, it would be different. So if you as a student would come from a culinary school, I think the culinary schools only focus a lot on technique because they want you to get that technique, and that's why they make you practice, and that's why the waste is so high, because you've just started out, right? You can't probably perfect a dish in like one go, so you're going to take some time to practice it. When they come to you, you have to tell them that this is your style of cooking, this is your style of, you know, looking at ingredients, respecting your ingredients. It's how you tutor them, and it could take time. So that's why it's learning and unlearning and then relearning, because you have to teach them your style. And then that's, and if you see that, you know, okay, they have that spark in their eye, they want to learn, or they like your style, because there have been, you know, kids from culinary school who've come to me and they've not liked working with me because I have a more casual, you know, probably my plating is more casual and rustic and, you know, wholesome, and they wanted to probably go to a Michelin star where the plating is finer, or, you know, they did a different cuisine. So I think it's all about what, you know, you believe in and how you want to run your business, and then you know, you make them learn that, and some of them do that really well.
Yeah.
Chef Smalls, anything to add to that?
Just that, echoing what both of you said, it's I don't know that one shoe fits all. As much as we'd like to think that the training could start at a particular place, and again, to someone's point earlier about having sustainable classes that are options that people could take in culinary school, but essentially every culinary school is educating people in the way in which they think is best, not necessarily what's best for the world or anybody else. It's ego driven. And so what the student has to understand is that you're going to have to learn and relearn. You know, you're going to have to adapt because, to her point, I want a rustic plate. I don't want a stacked up high, kind of skyscraper dish on a plate. I don't want unapproachable food. I don't want pretty food. I want food that looks good, tastes good, and mirrors my style. So that process essentially has to be there. But I do think that what you can do is put the fundamental principles of sustainability into an education, as a class and a reference. It's like anything else. You learn a different skill and you're exposed.
But ultimately, it's got to be industry led. It's got to be from businesses first, really.
Well, chaps, I'm sure we could have sat here for another hour talking. So much food for thought, pardon the pun. But, absolutely fascinating insights into the industry and moving forwards in terms of making everything about it a lot more sustainable. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel today. Great to meet you all.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.